Hello and welcome to the NewsX Sunday Guardian Roundtable. Well, as India enters the 75th year of independence, we are here today debating the idea of India. We have moved actually quite far away from the Nehruvian idea of a socialist secular India. And in some reasons, this move had to happen. Socialism is an outdated concept. Secularism was mostly based on the foundations of appeasement. So but these are being replaced by a new order. What is the new order all about? Is it an intolerant India? Is it an India that is impatient, angry, or is it an India that we are all very comfortable with? I've been reading, in fact, two books recently, which have really helped me form my thoughts and figure out what the new India is. And I've called both the authors here. Sanjay Baru talked about a new power elite, which is now taking shape, which is already in place. And Pavan Verma's book on the great Hindu civilization, which is, as we look to the present and the future, we must also acknowledge the legacy of our past, which he says has either been underreported or misrepresented. So today, here to discuss the idea of the age that we're living in, I have joining me Pavan Verma, Sanjay Baru, and Sohail Seth. Pavan, I'll begin with you since we've just had a discussion on your book. Also, the idea of a new India, what kind of India do you think we're living in right now?
Well, I think today the India we are living in is run more on the basis of the ideology of a very narrow section of the people. It's an ideology largely of exclusion. It's prone to violence. It is averse to discussion and dialogue. It is occasionally alarmingly patriarchal. It's orthodox. It is geared to winning elections irrespective of which principles are jettisoned in the way. And it represents a distortion of the entire narrative of Hinduism, Hindu civilization, the Republic of India's professed commitments, both through the freedom movement as expressed by our founding fathers and as enshrined in the preamble of the Constitution. So, in sum, I see an India which is definitely, to use your words, becoming more intolerant. And what seems to have happened is that as a result of the strategic ambiguity of the leadership of the current dispensation to the excesses within its own order, you have seen the progressive rise of a lumpen element in politics and in society. That lumpen element, the powers that be both encouraged and had the luxury of distancing themselves from it if there was too much of an excess which would get opprobrium. But on the whole, their tacit collusion with the emergence of this lumpen right has led to a serious threat to the very foundations of the republic and to the vision of our founding fathers.
Dr. Baru, you've also written about the new power elite that has come in, but the thought behind the new power elite is just a lumpen elite, or is there more to it than that?
Well, first, let me begin by saying that I entirely agree with whatever Pavan has just said. So I will not repeat what he has said. But let me begin from a different track and then address your question. Since we are on the verge of observing or celebrating the 74th anniversary of our independence and entering the 75th year, I think it's very, very important for all of us to go back and read the Indian Constitution. I mean, not the one amended again and again over a period of time, but the one adopted in 1950. It begins with the line, India, that is Bharat, is a union of states. And India came into existence as the India that we know today as a consequence of that union of states. I think this is an extremely important principal idea to reiterate today when the whole concept of what is India is being redefined in the manner in which Pavan just spoke. But there is this whole argument that somehow this India has been around for forever and this is the Hindu India. I think while there may be a whole school of thought pursuing that idea, the fact is that on the 15th of August every year, we celebrate the independence of the Republic of India. On the 26th of January, we celebrate the creation of the adoption of the Constitution of the Republic of India, not of some, civilizational India or a India of the ages. And this republic is a union of states. And this constitution was voluntarily adopted by an elected constituent assembly. And therefore, it's the voice of the people of India. And changes to it have also been made with the support of the Indian Parliament, and therefore also has the imprimatur of the people of India. Now, at a time when the very definition of what constitutes India and what constitutes Bharat, forget the word India, because after all, the constitutional word for India in an Indian language is Bharat. So what is Bharat? What is Bharatiyata? I think these are important ideas. And my coming to your question, Priya, the elite, if you like, the power elite that led the national movement and shared this vision of India. By and large, there were fringe elements on the extreme left and the extreme right who may not have shared this idea of India. In fact, I don't think much of the left had much disagreement with this, but certainly many on the right disagreed with it. But this was the idea of India, that the elite that led the national movement, and the elite that ran the institutions of democracy for a half century after independence pursued. Today we have a group of people, and I will not call them the elite. They may have power, and that's the distinction I draw in my book between those who are powerful, those who are wealthy, those who are influential. These are very different groups of social classes. But power, since it derives from democratic election in India, and not the power that comes from wealth, because the power that comes from wealth, Indian business is today alienated. You just read the speech of the Prime Minister, the Finance Minister, and all the yesterday at the Confederation of Indian Industry. They are all reaching out to Indian business and asking, why are you not investing? Which means the wealthy in this country are holding back. The powerful, that so-called powerful who run the country today are elected members of the majority party. They're trying to redefine our constitutional understanding and the understanding of the national movement, and that is what concerns me. Sorry for taking more time.
Okay, now I'll bring Sahgal in. Sahgal, you heard both the arguments before you. How do you feel today in terms of, how do you see India?
So, apart from what Pavan and Sanjay have said, 4 or 5 things. Number one, we have moved from republic to Rashtra. And this is not just what I'm saying in terms of nomenclature or phraseology. The republic has been overshadowed by Rashtra, and what Sanjay and Pavan alluded to is this whole concept of Hindutva, Hinduism, religion. Earlier, we ran on parallel tracks. Appeasement was always there. Today, a different religion is being appeased to, or being appeased, as it were. The majority in this country were often the silent voices because they chose to be silent or they weren't stoked enough. Today, the majoritarian community or the majority community feels that why are other communities being given the light of day and why were we not being neglected? It's our time of day. What has happened is the powers that be that are running this country have confused between republic and Rashtra. And they believe that we are now a Rashtra and no longer a republic. The day you believe in that, the fundamental idea of India will change. Because India will and must remain a republic. It must have the importance of its states, the importance of citizenry, the importance of democracy. A Rashtra may or may not guarantee that. So that's number one. Number two, I don't know about intolerance, tolerance, blah, blah, blah. We've always been tolerant on the one hand and intolerant on the other. I mean, the fact that Mahatma Gandhi had to spend the nights preceding independence in Noakhali was another way of intolerance because of the communalism that we saw, the communal riots that were flaring up. And this too, when we were saying, oh, both the communities used to live in harmony. My parents are from Amritsar. Ironic, Amritsar had a greater Muslim population and Lahore had a greater Hindu population pre-partition. So these were communities that lived in harmony. For political reasons, we have continued to eat away at the Republic and strengthen the Rashtra. When you do that, you will willy-nilly destroy the idea of India. Because India is a cauldron. It's a melting pot. It's a confluence of various cultural dispositions, of various political leanings, and various religions or faiths or whatever. The day you want to separate it and create a cement plant out of a republic and make people live in silos, you will have enduring stress and you will eat away at the republic. The day you eat away at the republic, you eat away at the idea of India. There will be no idea of India left. There'll be an idea of a Rashtra, and each person will interpret that Rashtra as he or she wishes, depending on whether they come from a political spectrum or a religious spectrum.
And which
So
side
there
of
are
the
trouble.
Fair enough. Pawan, but wouldn't you argue that in order to get foundations of a republic, you have to take the legacy of the Rashtra also with it?
See, it depends how you interpret Rashtra. If Rashtra is a civilizational concept, which includes some of the great refinements of the past, and not merely an exclusionary emphasis, then a republic can be a Rashtra in a civilized sense. But sometimes there are inflexibilities writ into the definition of Rashtra, and that creates the problem. Let me say, just as a matter of perspective, that we are a young republic. 75 years in the march of history is a very small milestone. We have to assess what has happened in this period in this perspective, that this is work in progress. What I believe is that a nation which had been colonized for 3 centuries became independent. Jawaharlal Nehru, in his first address to the nation, long years ago, we made a tryst with destiny, spoke in a language which was understood by 1% of the people. And that too, most of them could not spell tryst, so or pronounce it. So the fact of the matter is that we have made beginnings from there, and today the pendulum seems to have swung to the other extreme. Let's give credit where it's due, where precisely those sections which were excluded in spite of political independence, who were not part of the anglicized elite, who did not speak English in the right fluency and accent, who did not come from old wealth, who were part of the republic but on its margins in terms of status and social acceptability. There is an assertion on that side, and it's a good corrective, in my view, because after all, those who speak English correctly, and Sanjay has written a book on the changing power equations, which is a very perceptive book. Those who can speak English with fluency don't have an extra cranium. You have to ultimately, in this country, create a level playing field between people, between classes and castes. That is why the thrust towards affirmative action is essential. There is an attempt to forge a unity which is artificial of a certain community. By that I mean Hindu consolidation transcending its caste line. But inherent in that, under the awning of that unity, are hugely unacceptable inequalities, great exploitation, discrimination, even oppression. Therefore, these things need to be rectified. There can be no abstract idea of India. That idea must be based on equality. That idea must be based on inclusion. That idea must be based on respect for all sections of society. That idea must be based on gender parity. Now, these are issues that need to be negotiated through society. They cannot come by a magic wand. And perhaps 75 years is too little. What we are seeing in the rush towards change and the rectification of past power equations is a distortion, perhaps, which we also need to fight. And that itself will take time in a democratic system. But there is an attempt to hijack the narrative towards an overcorrection and therefore a excessive assertion of certain classes and sections only and based on religion. That is against the very fundamental tenets of the republic, because quite apart from the ideological basis, it's the most impractical idea possible to try and create a Hindu Rashtra. Because we have people of so many faiths here living cheek by jowl across the country. So therefore, we have to see the whole thing, Priya, in greater perspective. This is par for the course for an evolving republic. But each citizen must be aware of the challenges to the basic, fundamental, foundational character of the republic. That's very important. If we let our guard down there, I'm afraid India will not be either Bharat or a republic.
We're discussing, as India completes its 74th year, we're discussing the idea of India as it is today. We've discussed, Dr. Baru, the ideal India really, but how far are we from that? One set of ideals has been replaced by another. Is that what's happening?
Well, they have not replaced. I think that is the whole point of what Pawan just said. There's contention. We are going through a phase of contention between ideas. And there is an attempt to change the idea of India, but that is being challenged. And let me answer this question in a slightly different way. Sometime back, I had the opportunity interacting with Sri Mohan Bhagwatji, who is the Sarsang Chalak, I think it's called, of the Rashtriya Swayamsevak Sangh, RSS. He was in Delhi in September, if you recall, 2018, I think, and I was invited to listen to his lectures at the Vigyan Bhavan. And I went to listen to him, as I would go to listen to anyone who has something interesting to say. And in the middle of that, one evening I was invited to meet him backstage. And the only thing I said to him was, again, to quote the first line of the well, I said to him, I said, look, the Indian Constitution begins with the sentence, India, that is Bharat. Now, Bharat is an Indian term. It is derives from Sanskrit. It is there in every single Indian language, in Telugu, in Malayalam, in Hindi, in Bengal. Bharat is the definition of India. Why do you want to insist on use of the word Hindutva? Because the way you want to define Hindutva in this all-inclusive manner that everybody is Hindu, is Hindu, Muslims are Hindu, Christians are Hindu, but everybody is a Bharatiya. So he heard me out and then went back to the podium the next evening and actually said all this. He said, those who don't like the word Hindutva can use the word Bharatiyata. I actually came away from that meeting with a sense of hope that, here is an organization that is willing to rethink. But I don't see that, filtering down. And we insist on a definition of India that is excluded, that excludes people. And I think that is really the issue of contention. I mean, when you say that one idea of India has been replaced by another idea of India, it has not been replaced. But there is a sharp ideological battle between those who believe India, that is Bharat, and those who believe India, that is Hindu Rashtra. I think that is the issue today. And we need to be very clear that the Constitution is, every member of the union government and every state government, every official swears by the Constitution. And that duty bound to adhere to the principles of the Constitution. So how can you redefine the Constitution without actually changing the Constitution? So I think I'm not yet willing to accept that there's a new idea of India. There is only one idea of India, which is there in the Constitution. India is a union of states, and it is a plural, multicultural, multilingual. The Constitution recognizes every single language. It recognizes every religious, community on an equal footing. It recognizes gender on an equal footing. So when you have this, one of the best constitutions in the world, a written constitution, why are we constantly trying to, search for new ways of defining ourselves?
Why do we do this search, Sahel? It's a good question that Dr. Baru's put up.
Let me play devil's advocate here. Perhaps the four of us are being unfair, because if we are a democracy, which we are, we have taken upon ourselves the constitution which we have. If a majority of the people believe in either inclusiveness or exclusion, that's what it is. I mean, we cannot change unless you can alter the structure of your basic democracy, which will go largely by the maximum number of people, majority in both strength and appeal. There's very little you can do. Because let's imagine we, four of us, are seemingly right-thinking people, and we don't want that idea of India to be corrupted, or we don't want that idea of India to be destroyed. Who are we? If in Parliament, people like us, our fellow citizens, are electing people who believe they are being elected to pursue an agenda which they believe is the idea of India, who are we to challenge that? Because A, we don't have the majority. B, we're continuously seeing changes. I mean, I know it's a facetious argument at times, but this is the logic that is being used by people in power and has been used by people in power for eons. Please remember, as Pavan said, 1% of the people understood what Nehru was saying, but he spoke in English. You had a sense of entitlement. Sanjay in his book talks about that. So we can continue to say that, sorry, our idea of India is being corrupted, but do we have control over that idea of India anymore?
Sohel, my good friend, democracy enable you to challenge the citadels of power, even if they are based on transient electoral strengths. Democracy is challenge, and that's why societies change. I don't believe any government can today take a decision as was taken in the Shabano case to overrule an eminently reasonable judgment of the Supreme Court for payment of maintenance to a wife divorced under the repugnant triple talaq law to overtake it by an ordinance. Because even though at that time Rajiv Gandhi had a majority of over 400 seats, this particular notion of appeasement merely for Muslim electoral support has been challenged and is probably not going to be attempted anymore. Similarly, when you have today a government which has come with a majority in two successive elections, 2014 and 19, without a single representative of India's largest minority elected, no Muslim. When after 2010, 98% of cattle lynchings have happened after 2014, 86% of the victims were Muslims. The majority of them happened in BJP-ruled states. And the cow vigilantes made no secret of the fact that they were related to violent Hindutva groups. Now, you can't say that because they have the backing of governments which have been democratically elected, there will be no challenge to this narrative.
No, challenge is there. Challenge is there, Pavan. But all your pillars have succumbed. All your pillars have succumbed. The judiciary has succumbed. The media has succumbed.
Sohel, have you forgotten the emergency? Who would have thought when the emergency began that there would be a fight back of a nature that Indira Gandhi herself would lose the election. I am not saying something as dramatic will happen now, but democracies are about the churning of ideas. And don't forget one thing, survey after survey has shown that there are limits to polarization. West
I agree.
Bengal was one. West Bengal was one where the BJP came a poor second because even though all attempts were made for religious polarization,
I'm
it is not
sorry,
possible to do it.
Mamta Banerjee, I come from that state.
Yeah.
There is no bigger polarizer. Actually, there are 2 or 3 bigger than her. She equally polarized communities. She did appeasement of the Muslims like you can't imagine. I'm from West
But she
Bengal.
did
I
not.
can give
She
you.
did not. She did not go with OSC. She did not go with ISM.
That's
There
irrelevant.
is
But the appeasement
there
was
is
there.
middle of the ground, sensible Indian citizenry, which needs to be tapped, which will be a challenge to all excesses on both extremes.
There I agree.
This is the challenge for the idea of India today.
So Priya, your
On
next
that, yeah.
discussion should be: do we have a functioning democracy, or do we have a democracy only in name? Because the opposition is so marginalized and so irrelevant in today's India, that in itself is a threat to democracy.
I think that's a very good idea. On that, I'll end this note by wishing you all a happy Independence Day. And also the fact that what keeps the idea of India going is, as Pavan and Sohail and Dr. Babu said, the fact that we have a democracy. How vibrant is it? How active are we? That is something I'm going to call you all back to discuss, but later. In the meantime, do have a good Independence Day weekend. And thank you all for this conversation.
For more such videos, subscribe to the NewsX YouTube channel, hit the bell icon.